Okay, we've got the first, second, and third face done on this board. We can go right to the fifth and sixth face before we do the fourth face. Remember, the fourth face we're going to do on the table saw to get that square and parallel with the second face, but we can skip over to the chop saw right now. This is a chop saw or a miter saw. Generic terms is a chop saw, and you just pull this down to make it cut. This is an articulated saw, so you can also bring it out, pull it down, and push it forward to make the cut. Either one will work. It just depends on how wide the board is. If it's a real wide board, now you need to bring it out and push it in. So before we take the cut, let's make sure that it is right. This aluminum fence here is bolted down on the back side. And the problem with that is it's aluminum, which is a soft metal, and people have been known to just jam wood up against there, or they get a catch if the board is warped. You know, if the board is touching on both sides of the saw but not in the middle, now when it cuts, it's actually going to relieve some of the pressure, and it's going to pull the board in against the face, slam it against the face. You get a catch or whatever, and that can ultimately bend the face or knock it out of adjustment. So if you want this to be perfectly square and parallel with everything, first thing you want to do is check the saw. So you always want to check everything before you start. I'm going to start with a framing square. And I put the framing square up against the fence. I'll pull the guard back and hold it back with my thumb, and then I just bring the square up against the blade to see if it's square. If I have a big gap on one side or the other and touching on the other side, it needs adjusted. Or it could be as simple as somebody has moved it a little bit and now it is out of adjustment. So I'm going to bring this back to square, and I check it, and it looks like I got a nice even gap, tight everywhere, so it will cut square. So with that, I take the second face, put it up against the fence, and I'm ready to take a cut. So if you have plenty of stock, you can take a heavy cut. If you've got just a little stock, you just clean up the end. You always want to make sure that you clean up the end, because you aren't real sure if this was cut parallel with everything to start with. You've altered that by running it through the jointer and the thickness planer, so you always take a thin cut. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to put the board on this side so I can control the saw with my right hand. And I line it up, and I have a knot right here that I want to take off. So I'm just going to cut the excess off. Another little thing to note, when I ran this through the thickness planer, it undercut both ends just a little bit. They call that snipe. So a good practice is leave the board way too long as you are preparing it, and then you just cut that excess snipe off with the saw and get rid of it. So with that, I'm going to put it right there on the snipe. That'll get rid of the knot and everything, and it'll clean it up real nice. I am going to turn the saw on, wait for the blade to come up to full speed before I pull it down, and when I get down to the bottom, I'm going to take my fingers off the trigger, let the blade come to a full stop before I bring it back up. If I bring this back up while the blade is spinning, at the least you're going to have the teeth coming in contact with that, and it'll put little divots in the end grain. But the worst case scenario is it can catch the wood as you're pulling it back up and cause a kickback. So I'm just going to eliminate all that just by making the cut, waiting for the blade to stop, before I move anything. So here goes the cut. And you notice nothing moved. It's possible this cutoff piece could have moved a little bit, caught on the saw blade and kicked it back at you. But since I stopped the saw blade before bringing it back up, a lot safer. Now, was my square lying to me when I checked the saw blade? The way to do that is check it with the square to see if it's square. Oh, it's a little bit off. So something isn't quite right. It lied to me a little bit. Let's double check that again. And yeah, I can see where it's off just a little bit. I can micro adjust that over here. And I lock it back down, and I check it again. And that looks better. Let's take another cut. So it's always good to double check. Check, check, and recheck. And I'm just going to take a little thin cut, about half the saw blade width, and see how it looks then. And now it is square. But you notice, I raised the saw blade while it was still spinning, and it put some marks on there. I don't want that. So let's do it the proper way. And now it's cut nice and clean. So we have that side done. The next step would be to cut it to whatever the specified length is. I'm just going to take a cut just so you see how it works, but this time I'm going to bring the saw out like this and push it forward. So either way it works, and you have the ends nice and square, parallel, smooth. So this board would be ready to use. But what if I want an angle on this? Well, that's where this part comes in. There's a lever right underneath this knob here. You pull that up and you can turn this to whatever angle you want. Here I've got it set at 15 degrees, so let's cut a 15-degree angle. And there I have a 15-degree angle. But if you're a carpenter and you're putting up trim, you may need a compound angle. So to do a compound angle, I'm going to leave that set at 15 degrees. And I'm going to release this so I can turn the saw blade to 15 degrees. And I'm going to take a cut 15 degrees one way and 15 degrees the other way. It's called a compound angle. And there I've got a compound angle. For you carpenters that's doing rafters, that's going to come in real handy. Or if you're doing trim in a nice room where you have to have a compound angle, that's how you do it.